Hey everyone, I'm your host Ross Gallagher and welcome to Fintech Insider On Air episode 24. We were just saying we can't believe that it's already episode 24. So thank you so much for joining us last week. We had a bunch of people live and even more watching afterwards, so thanks for all your support. Last week, David chatted to our new CMO, Eric Fulweiler. We're all really excited to have Eric on board. They spoke about B2B marketing in 2019. So do check that one out on David's Periscope and on the 11FS YouTube as well. This week, David's not here, but I am hosting in his place, and we will be talking about the Remedies Fund, Pool D. So to discuss this, we've got a great guest, Emily Nicole, who is technology editor at City AM. How are you doing, Emily?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Good to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
Trying to beat all this dreary weather outside.
Yeah, I know. It's awful, isn't it?
I
So
know.
where we are in Devonshire Square, we're perfectly covered, so we can never get a sense of whether it's raining or not just by looking out the window. So we take a gamble, I feel, every time we walk out.
It's pretty much a gamble if you're outside anyway.
It honestly feels like every single time we've walked outside in the last couple of weeks, it's been raining.
Yeah.
So that just hasn't gone in our favour. But look, we are here, hopefully brightening up people's day. And as I say, it's really good to have you here. Okay, so as usual, we normally start the show, we normally kick off with some stats. So I'll throw some out, and then if I get any wrong, you can just fact check me. Right?
Sure.
Okay, great. So as I say, we're going to talk about the Capability and Innovation Fund from Pool D. Pool D, quite vaguely actually, it's got quite a vague sort of mission statement, which is for the commercialization of fintech relevant to SMEs. So I guess we'll explore what that means as we go through.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a pretty vague mandate, but so that's what Pool D was all about. There were 5 awards or grants, each of £5 million, and they received 60 applications. It's a lot of applications.
I thought there'd be more though, you know.
Yeah, I know.
This is like meant to be the easy pool.
Yeah. A lot for the BCR to sort through though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the application window ran from 1st of November last year to the 30th of April this year, so 6 months. And then the next batch of handouts from the Capability and Innovation Fund, 425 million in total. That's going to focus on the expansion of business offerings to include lending or payment services to SMEs in the UK. That comprises 4 awards each of £10 million. Right, how did I do in all those facts?
Sounds good.
All right, okay, good. If you're happy, I'm happy. And the next, so Pool C, so rather confusingly, Pool D was awarded before Pool C.
Yeah.
So Pool C is going to close on the 28th of June 2019.
Probably because that's like the most, the biggest chunk of money for the most people. Like we've gotten all of the massive awards out the way, and then now we're doing the small ones, but they probably want a bit more time to decide on the 10 million chunks.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. And then, so just to pick up on that and maybe expand on that history lesson a little bit, if anybody doesn't know what the Remedies funds are or where they came from, so they were, I guess, a measure put in place in response to the bailout that RBS received from the government in response to the 2008 crash. They took a slightly different route initially, trying to divest out Williams & Glyn, which, despite a good amount of investment in separating out the tech, that sort of fell away, and the remedy suggested after that then was this Capabilities and Innovation Fund so the one condition, obviously, that RBS had to reduce out its share of the SME market, and challenger banks can apply for a share of the Capability and Innovation Fund to improve products and their ability to compete with RBS in that space.
Yep.
So should we dive right in? Do you want to talk to us about who won the Pool D awards?
So we had 5 winners this time. Each one got £5 million, as you said. First up was Fluidly, which provides payments as a service technology to both banks and businesses. Form 3, which does AI-powered cash flow forecasting and management.
Another mouthful.
I know, but I feel like that's what it's going to be this time. It's all super techy.
Yeah.
Funding Options and Swoop Finance, which are both SME financing marketplaces. And then Codat, which does a single standard API for accounting and banking integrations.
Lots of mouthfuls.
Yep, very techy.
So, I mean, what do you think this says about, I guess the problems that they're trying to solve, I'm looking particularly at funding options, sweep finance. We know that one of the real issues that SMEs face is getting access to finance. I think something like an average 6 months from a high street bank for a no and 9 months for a yes. So it looks like actually that's been a sort of priority in allocating out the grants.
Yeah, because I think, as you said earlier, Pool C will be for the lenders themselves, but this pool this time round was really for those companies that handle the tech and the underlying structure for making these kind of financings available and work for SMEs. And so with Swoop Finance and Funding Options, those are two companies that really help SMEs have as much choice as possible when looking for financing. They're not the ones doing the funding themselves, but they're giving SMEs the wide variety they need to really actually do what this fund is even meant to do, increase market competition, right?
And I mean, you make an interesting point, because it's not always that those financing options aren't out there. It's about finding better ways to connect those businesses that are looking for financing options with the right partners that are out there.
And then the other three, so Fluidly, Form 3 and Codat, all do slightly different things, but they're all trying to help then those businesses and those banks take more advantage of data that's out there to make SME financing more available. So it's not necessarily about connecting a business to a lender, it's more about connecting lenders and businesses to data that they can then use to improve functionality or options, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and I think we're starting to get a good picture of what each of the winners are going to do in terms of putting that grant to good use. And do you want to talk us through that? And I think you've got a little bit of an exclusive as well.
Oh yeah, sure. So we had like a couple of inklings as to what each of the 5 players was going to do with the money. Form 3 said that they would use the grant to support itself and eBury in building the first API-based global transaction platform for UK SMEs, which would then be distributed through financial institutions to kind of scale it out. Fluidly said they'd use the funding to accelerate the development of its software, its AI cash flow management software. Funding Options said it would use the funding to help broaden and encourage a wider choice of finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, so basically, again, expand the platform. But Codat and Swoop Finance never really told everybody what they were going to do with the money.
We weren't sure, were we?
But Codat messaged me yesterday. They said that they're going to be using the money to basically expand awareness of what they do, because they like to use the phrase open accounting versus open banking. They tackle real-time accounting data and make that more available to banks and businesses so that they can look more at what's happening inside an account versus in transactions like with open banking.
And in terms of how that plays out in practice, so it can be little things from auto-populating forms when a business applies for credit, so using their accounting data, all of those types of things. So just making all of those processes a little more seamless, a little bit more straight through. And
then with Swoop Finance, we still don't know, but assumedly the same, expanding the product, gaining market share, all the good things you use funding for.
So, yeah, exactly. I think the other thing that was interesting when you were going through that list is Fluidly, and the idea of the, obviously a really useful service, again, that sort of AI-powered cash flow forecasting and management. Again, another really difficult issue for small businesses, kind of understanding their financial position, not just today, but then also being able to model that over a period of time, and then, look to use services like Funding Options, for example, or Swoop Finance to plug any gaps.
Yeah, because this fund isn't just about helping businesses find a way to get a loan. It's also about helping businesses to be more sustainable in the way they operate and think to the future and make sure that they're ready for whatever's coming. And that's definitely what Fluidly's tech helps them do.
Just taking some of the stress out of managing a business day to day, right?
Yeah. I mean, and using AI to help with it as well.
Yeah. But yeah, putting that tech at the point where you actually need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it can actually have real potential in helping you to solve your business's problems. And also, it is that seamless point, or it is that point about removing friction. I think that's always been, or it has more recently, when people have spoken about how they want to help SMEs, it's about getting the bank or the financial service provider out of the way, and that any time that businesses spend managing these types of things, is time that they are not dedicating to either running their business or free time, right? Which ultimately is what they want to do.
Yeah, because as like people who love fintech, we often forget that the relationship between businesses and banks is not the be all and end all of what they do. We love to talk about how those things can improve, how businesses can get more access to financing from a wider variety of players. But actually, that's something they want to think about probably not very often. And when they do, they want it to be quick, easy, simple, done and dusted. So it's interesting to see the kind of mix of what we've got here as well and how they spread out this pool.
Yeah, so I'm always reminded about the sort of personal side of it whenever I speak to the guys at Oak North. What's really interesting is how their business idea for Oak North came from their sort of own personal, Rishi and Joel's own personal frustration around trying to get a sort of short-term bridging loan for their previous business, Copalambus. So they, I believe, went to a high street bank to look for 50k or so bridging loan. And it took months and months to come to a decision, and ultimately they were told yes, but Rishi's house had to be used as collateral.
Yeah.
Now, this was at a time when Rishi and Joel hadn't taken a salary out of the business for 3 years, so they decided not to do it, and then they went to one of the big institutional banks and were given 10 million unsecured. So it's very clear that there is a major gap in that space.
And we're also seeing now in this particular climate, lending is kind of decelerating. Loan books are growing a bit smaller for lenders. So this pool or this fund anyway, is coming at a really important time for these companies as well. Well, the ones that are getting the awards, because businesses are kind of probably looking around thinking, well, I don't really know who to go to get a loan. I don't really know what's out there. So marketplaces like Swoop Finance and funding options will be really useful.
Agree. I guess sort of we've touched on it a little bit, but what do you think this is going to do? Is it going to start to shake up, at least from a tech perspective, the SME space in this country? Do you think there is, in terms of the 5 providers that they've chosen to award grants, do you think there's a bit of a statement of intent in there? How do you feel it's going to be received?
I think it's definitely a statement of intent, but I'm not sure if I'd use the word shaking it up. It's kind of like with the choices they've made, it's almost like we don't really want to reinvent the wheel and change the system. What we want to do is make everything that's currently in place a lot better at doing their own jobs. So they've got API providers that can help businesses just run a bit smoother and make lenders access finance a lot better. And then they've got marketplaces that will help basically even out the competition side of things. But there's nothing being like, this is a major disruptor and everybody's going to have to do everything differently now.
I think, and are we missing the piece actually that says, all right, we've got the marketplace and we can connect the providers with the business? Are we missing the piece that says, well, actually, based on where you're at as a business, based on your unique circumstances, based on what it is that you're trying to achieve moving forward, will actually proactively start to match you to loans and that sort of stuff? And is that where we could go moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. And also with the next pool coming, we've done the business banking side with pool A and B, and then with the next pool coming, we'll have the lenders, and that will be where they introduce the disruption on that end. About the kinds of loans that get given out and there's options and assessments they make on businesses.
What's your general feel? This is just my own personal interest, actually. What's your general feel for how the awards have been, and I'm not just talking Pool D now, but how they've been received, sort of more generally, obviously, being in the media? What's the sort of the media reaction been? Because it's been quite interesting. I mean, obviously, Pool A awards were quite geared towards the challenger end of the market. Pool B then slightly more towards the incumbent space. Obviously, now we're sort of seeing with Pool D that sort of the tech come to the fore. Do you get the sense that it is achieving its sort of stated objective of just creating that extra competition? Are we going to see people actually move away from RBS? NatWest obviously having a disproportionate share of that UK SME segment. What's the sort of sentiment, the feel?
I mean, obviously the whole point of the fund is to get people to be moving away from RBS and NatWest and the like. So I think that is the hoped end goal. whether or not that's actually going to happen. I mean, as you pointed out, Pool A was very challenger and Pool B was very incumbent. And I think also Pool B was very incumbent in reaction to the fact that everybody was like, Pool A is super challenger. What do you like? Are you leaving everybody else out of the equation?
Yeah, and I mean, of course, with Metro getting the single biggest award so far, shortly after there was the sort of blunder in their loan book and reporting and all that sort of stuff. So it's not been without pushback, without challenge. Of course, Anne Bowden as well in Starling was linked to someone that used to work at Starling that was then involved in making the decision. So it's not been without controversy.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think now that we're in those smaller pools, we're going to see less of that kind of media reaction. Sure. But I definitely think in Pool A and B, there was a lot of decisions that were queried.
Yeah.
But you never really know where that's coming from, whether it's coming from people who didn't get the awards.
Of course.
And they're a bit upset about it, or whether it's coming from big banks that are like, well, we don't really want this to get too diverse up in this competition space. So
Sure. So yeah, they've got their own
everybody's got an agenda,
motives.
right?
Yeah, of course. And look, you're always, I mean, this is the first time we've seen something like this, right? So when you do anything like that for the first time, there's always going to be questions
I do wonder if it'll ever happen again, though.
Yeah.
Whether I mean, this one took a massive bailout in order to happen, but we are kind of seeing the government getting more involved in handing out funding to young companies and tech disruptors and saying this is what it's going to take to kind of propel us forward.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, do you feel that that's because we're starting to prove the concept now? Obviously, Monzo, 2 million plus customers. They're saying that they've taken on board another 250,000 customers this month alone, which I mean, they're just incredible growth numbers. I think Revolut as well growing at a similar, if not even slightly
bigger,
faster. Yeah. So I suppose the timing was right in that sense, in that there's probably a general level of comfort now around digital-only banks where that wouldn't have been the case, even 5 years ago.
We're definitely over the early adopter side of the hype cycle.
Sure, yeah.
But now we're in the very harsh, steep climb towards mass adoption. And that's where we're now beginning to see people putting out TV adverts and trying to expand out of the London bubble, for example.
Right, yeah.
Whether or not the startups are going to be able to do it, I guess we'll have to see. But
no, absolutely. And expanding internationally as well, of course, because Monzo have now announced they're going stateside,
Monzo's
Revolut are
US.
going to Australia, which makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I guess the idea is that once you've done it once, can you do it again, right?
Yeah.
I spoke to Tom Blomfield last week as part of the Monzo US launch, and I said, what's kind of your strategy going into the US? Because in the UK, Monzo was entirely word of mouth growth.
Yep.
Same as Revolut, same as most of the startups. And in the US, he thinks he can do it again.
Yeah.
But it's a much bigger country, so we'll see.
It's a much bigger country, much more fragmented state by state from like a regulatory perspective, etc. One thing that's always baffled me about the US is that you can do something in one state and be 100% compliant and go next door and suddenly you're in hot water, right? I suppose the challenge is because the model that Monzo used and have used to sort of come to market, grow, scale, was so effective. It's how do you replicate that in a market like the US, but equally how do you localize it, right? That's the challenge. And I think Revolut are going to come up against the same challenge when they move to Australia. I can't remember with Starling if they announced that one of their intentions with the Pool A award was to expand internationally.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's with their Pool A fund. It's definitely something that's on their radar. They want to grow internationally, probably into Europe first before they go US way. But I think with Pool A, if you were then saying, oh yeah, so we'd like to take all this money from the RBS fund to ease competition or to make more competition in the UK, except we want to use the money somewhere else, I probably wouldn't fly too well.
No, sure, of course.
So,
yeah.
So they probably were saying, yes, no, we're going to make business banking in the UK much better first. But
yeah, good shout. And that's the key. I think, I mean, ultimately, yes, it's great to have the technology and all the making it a lot more seamless, like we said. But I think ultimately, first and foremost, it's about choice, right? And of course, we've seen Tide grow rapidly over the last number of months. Of course, with Clearbank, they were one of the £60 million awards in the Pool A, and are growing crazy numbers, like 85,000 customers now, looking to be, I think, behind CYBG, the second biggest SME bank by customer base in 2019. So
They're
lots
hoping.
happening. They're hoping, yeah, but
Yeah.
lots going on. There's some pretty good, pretty interesting ideas. So they're looking at, I think one of the big challenges I read this week obviously in the retail space as well, but in the SME spaces around current account switching, the number's incredibly low. And the big part that they reckon is behind that is because you lose a record of all of your transactions. If you've been with a bank for a long time as a business, that's quite critical. So introducing functionality to allow you to transfer all of that over so that you can hold on to it, but also that you can, trialing switching so that you can open an account with Tide, trial it for a little bit, and understand if it actually is genuinely better, so that you can start to get a feel. So again, just going towards that competition point.
Yeah, I kind of miss when we used to be able to do partial current account switches as well. I think you still can with some providers, but that's essentially what I did I tried out Monzo for a bit, so I did like a partial current account switch. Now you can't do that anymore because it was kind of messing up their metrics as to whether I was using it as a primary account or not.
Sure.
But I think that kind of technology is really useful for businesses as well when they're testing out where they want to go and diversifying competition.
Primary account point is interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because how do you define primary? I think, when you look at how the big banks ask you to switch, move your salary over, set up 2 direct debits. Well, does that constitute a primary account? I think Monzo, it's an account transaction in a given period. I think it's a month. But they're estimating, I think, about 30% of their book are primary customers.
Yeah, I think for a lot of, at least for retailers, the retail banks anyway, the criteria is your salary paid into that account.
Yep.
But then how do you determine what a salary transaction looks like? Because you're not going to necessarily know that person's employer. So you might just say, oh, maybe anything over, £700 counts as salary.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, it's all guesswork still.
If you're paying in a certain amount regularly.
So maybe we need startups to help us with that a bit more.
If you were setting up a business today, would you feel more confident about the options that are out there to help you run it?
I think definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, so my partner...
And that's a
also,
success, right?
Yeah. My partner's setting up a startup, and so he's gone through quite a few of the challenges now.
Yeah.
But it's never occurred to him to try an incumbent, because I think there's still a lot of barriers in testing with an incumbent about even just all the hassle you have to go through to open a business bank account. There's a lot of stages. You probably have to go into a branch with a whole bunch of documents and show them X, Y, and Z.
And that's only if you're a single director, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
forget trying to do it if you've got multiple directorship.
Yeah, so I think this kind of fund is super useful because it means that the challenges will be able to take more market share and show incumbents that you can open business bank accounts without requiring all of that extra information, and it's safe to do so.
Yeah, so we've been, and this isn't just a problem in the UK. So we've been doing quite a bit of work on the SME side of things, because we talk about market segments that are sort of underserved, overcharged, and that's where you find your opportunity. I mean, the SME sector anywhere typically sort of hits that right on the bullseye. And what's interesting is, and I guess I was getting to this a little bit earlier on as well, is that because the sort of bespoke-ish offerings that have been available to SMEs have typically been either so basic or, depending on the market you're in, basically non-existent. They're not looking for really advanced banking options. They're just looking to be able to open an account pretty easily. Because if I'm a business and I want to open a bank account, I typically want to do it because I'm a contractor and I've just got a gig, so I want to get paid. And if I'm looking for financing or whatever, I just want to get access to it quickly, because typically it's a stopgap that I need to fill kind of now, not in 6 months or 9 months' time. So solving for that onboarding piece, I think, is absolutely key. I think Tide, again, they're one of the few that actually will let you do instant account opening with multiple directors. So I think little things like that make a big difference. So I'm not surprised that your partner wasn't considering the the incumbents as such.
Yeah, no, I mean he's tried quite a few of them now, and they've all kind of. I think actually his favourite is Starling, just for smoothness of operation. But I mean, to each their own. You never know.
And Starling as well, being able to sort of slide back and forth between personal and business.
That's always useful.
Yeah.
But again, if you're a single director, I sort of assume it's very useful because I mean expenses are hard.
Yeah.
I think then again, so if this kind of thing was to happen again, or if there were ever more pools or something like that, it'd be interesting to see if they would be willing to kind of open these applications up to accounting software providers or banks that target just freelancers and sole traders, things like that, because those are areas that are important to businesses that aren't, the key first steps, but they're definitely all about getting you to being the most efficient you possibly can be.
Yeah, and that micro business space is always particularly interesting because those guys are, in every way they resemble personal customers, just with a couple of additional needs, and they're typically the ones that get left behind, right? They're typically the ones that, you set up a business, you basically get what feels like a very generic personal account with a load of fees whacked on top. So I think solving for that in the first instance as well, because actually that's your kind of underserved segment, as well as that sort of middle when you get from sort of 500k up to about that sort of institutional level, you're talking about 10 mil.
And hopefully we'll also see kind of regulators get on board with all this as well. It's not just funding that's the barrier, it's also how these businesses, when they're first starting out or challengers want to enter the space, how they can join in on the fun. And if getting a license takes you 2 years, well then you've got a long way to go. And
this actually just triggered my memory. This is another one of the things that Tide are talking about introducing, is the ability to use Tide to set up your business. So use Tide to start to register on Companies House, get your trading license, all that sort of stuff. And actually, in conversations that I've been having with people that are looking to play in this space as well, the idea that the bank can be more than just your bank. It sounds sort of silly, but the idea that your bank almost becomes your business partner, and that it becomes the first point of contact for not just your financial services, but things like being able to get licensed and that sort of stuff. And whether that's a resource center or whether that's actually, in say the Tide environment where you can actually get registered yourself. So interesting initiatives. I think still a fair amount of stuff that can happen in that space. So
education is key.
Eyes peeled. But education is key. It's absolutely key. And that again goes back to the point that we said about the big benefit of just the marketplaces is being able to just knowing what's there, like just being able to go to a single place, input your details and have everything sort of played back to you on a single screen rather than kind of being...
Yeah, and also know what it all means.
Yeah.
To be told this is what applying for this particular loan will mean over this one, or when you're starting a business and you need a bank account, this is what you're signing up for with us.
Yeah.
All of those are things that need to be spelled out more, and hopefully these funds and this pool will really help with that.
Yeah, and be able to put it at the point of need. So if I'm setting up my business or I'm a contractor or a freelancer, I'm probably doing it on my lunch break, trying to open my bank account or whatever. I'm, don't ask me to come into the branch for an hour to meet with a relationship manager so that he can talk me through all of the little things like that. But I think on the whole, pretty positive stuff. I mean, I think it's exciting, the brands that they've chosen.
Yeah, I think it's been exciting to see smaller companies get in that are doing very specific tech stuff, all of which is really useful. We haven't got any kind of big players shaking their hands in there. And hopefully through having this fund and also the publicity that comes with it, these players will all get a lot of links to incumbents that will help those incumbents also get better.
Yeah, agree. And actually you make a really, really interesting point around that disruptive potential. And, I think the companies that have been awarded here, while 5 million looks small in comparison to some of the Pool A awards, these guys are working to and building to startup principles. They're fully lean, they're agile, so actually they can probably make a 5 million award stretch pretty far.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any final words?
Not from me, I think that's great.
Awesome. Okay, excellent. I'm happy if you are. Okay, so that's all we have time for this week. Emily, where can people find out more about you and what you do at City IM?
So you can read my stories on cityim.com or in our print
Read
edition
them.
if you're in London.
Definitely read them.
And you can also follow me on Twitter at Emily J Nicole.
Emily J Nicole.
Yeah.
All right. And you
Nicole
can
with two
find.
L's.
Well, yeah, I've got you already. But
Yeah.
I don't know why I felt the need to repeat it. I think it's because I've been trying to get either Ross Gallagher or Ross M Gallagher for the longest time, and they're both taken. So I've just been stuck with Ross Gallagher 07.
Just at Emily Nicole has been taken by someone who hasn't tweeted since 2011.
I'm in a very, very, very.
Why has it not just been taken away from them? They're not using
know.
it. I could.
Yeah, you could. I mean, Emily J Nicole, that's still pretty good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's one letter extra.
All right. Well, look. Sadly, you can still find me at Ross Gallagher 07. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you want more insight like this, why not listen to our Fintech Insider podcast? It's available on all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want a topic discussed on air, hit us up on those emails or just tweet us at Fintech Insiders. And next week, David will be back in the hosting seat and our topic will be money and mental health. So a really worthy topic there, right?
Yeah.
We will be back next week. So thank you for joining and bye for now.